Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler and Jewelers America's co-branded webinar series. This month's webinar is sponsored by the Gemological Institute of America. Today, I'm joined by two of my three editors, Lauren and Lenore, and we are here to discuss what happened in Las Vegas. But before we get started, I just want to let all our attendees know that if you have a question, you can type it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. I'll be back on at the end of the discussion to share the questions. Also, today's session is being recorded and it's going to be posted on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday. Now I'm going to get the discussion started. And as I mentioned, I'll be back on at the end to field any questions. Thank you. Hello, ladies.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello. Well, thank you for joining me today. As mentioned, this is our annual Vegas recap episode of My Next Question, which I always enjoy. So everybody did their own appointments at the show and went around individually. So today we're just going to be sharing what we saw and what we heard. And we're going to start with something we'd like to call big news from our beats. I'm going to start, and I think the biggest news that came out of the show, from a diamond perspective anyway, was from De Beers. I think everyone knows a couple weeks before the show, news broke that Anglo American was looking to divest or demerge De Beers, and obviously they've owned De Beers for a number of years now. That is big news for the industry. So De Beers came out with a new strategy in Las Vegas. It is calling Origins. It's all about how it's going to cut costs and safeguard natural diamonds. I'm just going to go now. I'm working on an interview. I got the chance to sit down with De Beers CEO Al Cook while I was in Vegas, and I'm working on an interview that's going to be published on our website early next week. I'm going to go over a couple highlights from the De Beers origin strategy and share, though, a couple tidbits from my interview with Mr. Cook. So, as I mentioned, the strategy is called Origins. And in the very, very last line of the release, they included something that ended up being a pretty big headline, and that is they are pivoting their Lightbox facility, which was completed in 2020 in Gresham, Oregon, to industrial diamonds only, with a focus on diamonds for technology. They're not going to be growing diamonds for jewelry anymore, which I thought was pretty big news, and which I wrote about as soon as I got back from the show. So, as everybody knows, De Beers launched a lab-grown diamond brand called Lightbox in 2018, I believe. And so what does this mean for Lightbox? Like, in my mind, this is the end of Lightbox. If the factory where they're growing the diamonds for Lightbox is closing or pivoting to industrial diamonds, excuse me, I don't see how the brand continues. But when I asked Al Cook about this in Vegas, he said that Lightbox is going to continue for a few months. They're going to keep producing diamonds there for jewelry for a bit. And then they're going to, after the pivot happens to industrial diamond production, they are going to just let Lightbox continue with the stock they have. And they're going to let Lightbox continue with the stock they have. And then he said, after that, we'll see. But it's hard for me to understand what the future of Lightbox could be if the factory that was growing its diamonds, the only place that was growing its diamonds, isn't going to be growing diamonds for jewelry anymore. Two other thoughts about this before I moved on to some of the other points from Origin. Number one, I think maybe part of the reason they're leaving the door a little bit open on Lightbox, it seems to me, is De Beers is going to either have new owners or be a company out in its own in the next 12 to 18 months. So maybe these news owners will say, you know what, actually, we think Lightbox is a great idea, and we want you to keep that brand and stay in the lab-grown diamond jewelry game. Maybe one possibility. I don't know otherwise why you wouldn't just say the brand's being discontinued if you're not going to be growing diamonds for jewelry in that factory anymore. The second point is, and this is my fault, I neglected to ask Al Cook about this in Vegas, but there were rumors that were publicly reported about that De Beers was growing the diamonds that Pandora uses in its Lightbox diamond brand, which Lenore, I think, is just called Lab Grown Diamonds by Pandora, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So I did not ask him, but that's another good question I should follow up with, is if they're not growing diamonds for jewelry in the Lightbox facility anymore, Does this mean they're not growing diamonds for Pandora anymore either? If they were, which was never confirmed, though it's believed that they grow the diamonds for Pandora. So something else for me to follow up on, just two little questions to think about when we think about that pivot at the Lightbox factory. A couple other notes from De Beers origin strategy. There's a lot to digest here, but they're looking to cut costs, obviously make themselves more attractive to any potential investors, buyers. They're definitely focusing on diamond production in Africa. They announced that they're pausing underground exploration at the Gaucho Quay mine in Canada. And also they have a project on Baffin Island called Chittilac. And that's also been paused. And interestingly enough, just a little side note, the Chittilac website has already been taken down. They're in any diamond exploration they're going to be doing in Angola. They're also pivoting, and this is probably only of interest to me, but De Beers currently reports site results on a monthly basis. They're going to be pivoting to quarterly. So they call them sales cycles, sales cycle 1, 2, 3, 4. They're going to quit doing that, and they're going to start doing quarterly reporting on rough diamond sales. But in my understanding, it's going to be kind of more in depth. And they're also going to be doing more what they call category marketing, which for people, I think most people probably know this, but just in case you don't, category marketing refers to pushing diamonds as a whole, not just one brand or one store. So they experimented with this a little bit in the fourth quarter of last year. You remember they brought back the Seize the Day campaign. That's the campaign with the black background and the white type and the kind of bold, simple messages. Like one of them was artist credit Mother Nature. This was a revival of a campaign that I think first ran in the 90s. So they started experimenting with that a little more, but they said in Vegas that they're going to be doing more category marketing in conjunction with retailers. Lenore, you covered this already, but they already announced that they are doing a category marketing campaign with Signet, trying to drive natural diamond demand in all of Signet stores. Our cook told me in Vegas that there will be some kind of beacon, which is, beacons, past beacons, the 3-stone ring, the right-hand ring. There is going to be some kind of beacon, but they're not releasing any details yet on what that beacon looks like. So that was a lot. That was a lot from De Beers, and I hope that was helpful in sharing it. Lenore, I'm going to toss it to you, and you can tell us a little bit of the news you found out in Vegas.
Sure, yeah. So I'm the retail reporter at National Jeweler, so I'm going to share a little bit of news on that front. So just before the shows, we had a story about Watches of Switzerland acquiring Roberto Coin Inc. So it can distribute its jewelry in the US as well as Canada, the Caribbean, and Central America. So during the shows, I sat down for an interview with its CEO, Brian Duffy. So we met at their boutique at the Wynn, really beautiful, by the way, to talk about their jewelry strategy in the US. So I'm going to get into more details about that interview in an upcoming story, but bottom line is Watches of Switzerland is really looking to boost its jewelry presence in the US. In recent years, it's acquired a lot of independents, like Betteridge, and it's seen growing demand for branded jewelry, which I think is interesting and also kind of explains this move. They're a huge brand. That's a big get for them. I'm sure that's super exciting. And then when I was at JCK, I met with the Charles & Colvard CEO, Don O'Connell. So that company recently debuted its B2B portal. It's called Charles & Colvard Direct. And that allows independent jewelers and retailers to purchase loose moissanite from Charles & Colvard directly. And I'll also talk about this in an upcoming story, but this moissanite is now being graded by IGI. So it'll have all of the 4 Cs like you would see in a diamond in a grading report, and it's also going to have some metrics that are specific to moissanite. So he and I were talking about, the growing popularity of moissanite and its place in the market, especially as lab-grown diamond prices fall. Maybe there's a way for them to grab some market share there. Yeah, so that's my rundown of some of the new retail news.
Okay. Laura.
Hi, so I cover the colored gemstone beat for National Jeweler. So I am going to talk a little bit about some of the facts and figures that were given in the colored stone update. in Las Vegas. Really great panel. Kimberly Collins from AGTA, Stuart Robertson from Gem World, and then David Massey from 100% Natural. And so some of the things that came out of that panel, really similar to my roundup and state of the majors for the Tucson show. A lot of things still the same since then. So color is very, very hot. It's all over Couture, all over JCK. I think we've had a few conversations between the editors about how there were so few booths of just gold and diamond pieces at Couture. I mean, there was color everywhere.
Yeah,
So
almost every designer is finding a way to incorporate color,
For sure.
whether it's through
exactly.
gemstones, whether it's through enamel, whether it's through metal experimentation.
Exactly. And I'm going to talk a little more specifically about how I'm seeing color incorporated a little bit later in the webinar. But, you know, from the panel, one thing that came up a lot was that color is such a good opportunity for retailers right now. And that some research that Gemworld had done had showed that, you know, when a consumer comes in asking for a blue sapphire, that they're really maybe just asking for a blue stone, not exactly a sapphire. So,
But
you
for
know,
them, sapphire is the first thing that comes to mind. That's like for consumers, right?
exactly. I mean, maybe that's just something they saw in a magazine, TV show. It's a household name as a sapphire, right? So they may not have any idea what else is out there. And, you know, with sapphire specifically, the prices are so high. I think David mentioned they're 100, 200, even some of them up 300% just in the last year, maybe 2 years, which is really significant. So there's definitely a good opportunity to explore some alternative stones, different colors, shades, different types of stones. Specifically garnets, spinels, and zircons came up a lot. If I had to guess, I think it's because those three stones come in a variety of colors. There's a huge spectrum. So, you know, maybe you're getting alternatives for a handful of different stones just in your shades of garnet. So,
But Laura, I'm just going to throw something in here. I went to the Stellar booth, which I think is a great place to kind of like understand the broader market because they're just, I mean, the biggest jewelry manufacturer supplier in North America. And they had this massive display they had made for their show. It's beautiful of all the different colored gemstones they supply. Lenore, I think you saw this too, right?
I saw it. Yeah, it's really
And
something.
I was like, oh, you know, I was talking to them at the booth. I was like, why did you do this? They're like, we just want to show all the colors available. So if somebody comes in and asks for a pink stone, if they want a pink stone, there's this huge chunk of gemstones you could offer them that it's not just a pink sapphire or a morganite or you know, pink spinel if that's really expensive. So yeah, I think it's really interesting.
yeah, I agree. And that's the exact same thing that I heard from, you know, all of the dealers that I spoke to when I was there. It's a great educational opportunity also for consumers. And you know, it's hard to nail down one color that's trending. It kind of seems to be all of them, but something that came up a handful of times was nature colors. So blues and greens, both really big, really popular right now. Maybe just beneath that, some pinks and purples. I think we're kind of out of the Barbie era, but you know, people still, you know, love a shade of pink that maybe they haven't seen before, really hot pink and neon pink. So it's still popular.
We're not fully out of the Barbie era, is that what you're saying?
I'm never fully out of the Barbie era personally, but some different deposits that came up that these panelists were excited to see on the floor was some green jade from Guatemala. There is some minty peridot coming out of Afghanistan.
Ooh, my
Um,
birthstone.
and some minty tourmaline coming out of Africa, and you'll won't be surprised that those are all shades of green. And then, you know, two other things really stood out to me in Vegas, maybe not so much as in Tucson. Chrysoberyl, it's a yellowish, greenish stone, kind of comes in a few different shades, but faceted chrysoberyl specifically, saw a lot of there and heard from other dealers that they saw a lot of it too, which is interesting. It's a durable stone, it's lustrous, it's beautiful, and it's affordable. So it's cool to see people kind of leaning into that. And then tourmaline, I saw so much tourmaline at the show. Specifically from Brazil, though that's definitely not the only origin that's out there. The Cruzeiro mine had a huge presence at the show, so that was really cool to see. There's some beautiful, really good quality tourmaline out there.
Okay, great. That kind of segues in the next time thing I want to talk about. The fourth National Jeweler editor, Natalie, could not join us today, but she did leave us with some notes, of the trends she saw in Vegas. So I'm gonna find my notes. So it was, and I'm gonna preface this by saying this was Natalie. Natalie had just joined us in March, and this was Natalie's first couture show, first Las Vegas JCK/couture show ever. So I think it's really interesting to kind of, I know obviously she doesn't have the experience of some people who've been going to the show for a decade or more, but it's really interesting to see what somebody with fresh eyes thinks when they come and look at all this jewelry. I think it's informative as well. So Natalie pointed out a couple trends that I wanted to share. Perfectly imperfect pairings, earrings that don't match. And Lauren, when we were talking about this earlier, you mentioned that was something you saw a lot of too.
Yeah.
Jewelry designs inspired by architecture, which I think is something we see a lot. And this was another one we were actually talking about on Monday, transformable jewelry, earrings that can become a pendant, etc. Jewelry that serves multiple pendants, pendants that remove from necklaces and become brooches, necklaces that unclip and become bracelets. She also mentioned organic shapes, jewelry with flowing curves. And I thought that was interesting because that was also one of the trends Stellar highlighted at their booth. It makes me like, when I think of this shape, the best I can describe it is I think of like Elsa Pretty's bone cuff, like no sharp edges, like very soft, flowing, curving lines. And I wrote about that when I was writing about Stellar from the show, but Natalie picked up on that too. Two-tone metals, which I also thought was big.
Yeah.
White and yellow metals, often white and yellow gold. Jewelry with moving parts. She mentioned specifically Mind and Found, which was a design atelier brand at Couture, I believe. Had this ring, it was called the Sweet Life, and it slid open to reveal a box of chocolates. That was very cute.
So cute.
And then some of the motifs she mentions, some of which we highlighted in our pre-show couture, pre-show trend story, bows and snakes. Snakes I feel like always kind of come and go, and bows as well. Bows kind of go out, they come back. Scarabs, evil eyes and sun, moon, like celestial jewelry, which I think again always is kind of there. But she also mentioned palm trees and butterflies, which I thought was interesting, the butterflies and the palm trees specifically. And I would also say that I saw, perhaps to go with the palm trees, I saw a few flamingos, pink flamingos, which I really like. I really like the pink flamingo in jewelry. Monica Rich Kosan also had a very cute seahorse, just throwing that in there. And then Natalie also was interested in the music related jewelry she saw. She mentioned specifically Jade Russo, who's had this percussion collection for a while, her cymbal pendants. She's a great young designer. And then Soralina did this great collection in honor of David Bowie, his I can't think of the name out, but his persona, I can't think of the name. It'll come to me.
Stardust?
Ziggy Stardust, thank you.
You
So they had a Ziggy Stardust collection. They have had these guitar pick earrings for a while, and they also did that tape with the diamond pencil that you could rewind or fast forward the tape with the pencil. That's a very specific callback to people that used to listen to cassette tapes. Does not apply to everyone. But yeah, those were some of the trends. Lenore, Lauren, did I leave anything out? I know people always ask us about the trends when we come back from Vegas.
No, I feel like you got them all. We definitely saw a lot of color, a lot of transformable jewelry. And yeah, I saw that sort of like tropical vibe. I know like 'tis the season, but definitely like a lot of flamingos, a lot of palm trees, a lot of like bright, warm colors.
And we were discussing earlier, is this like to do with Palm Royale, that show? I don't know how popular it is. Is it an Apple
No,
show
I
with
don't know.
Kristen
I don't
Wiig?
know that show too well. I'm thinking maybe it's just that good, happy summer feeling.
That Palm Springs vibe.
The Golden
Okay,
Girls
good.
kind of vibe, you know?
Lauren, any trends that you feel like we missed?
No, I think in color specifically, a couple of things that stood out to me to note is that, I really saw a lot less enamel than we have. I think last year I feel like I saw a ton of enamel, not so much this year, but it's like I saw the same designs, but that enamel was, instead of enamel, a handful of jewelers come to mind that are using hard gemstones like onyx, turquoise, malachite. You
Yep.
still get that same, hard, even ceramic. You still get that same like very solid bright color, but just kind of a different material. Emily P. Wheeler and Melissa Kay, both. I feel like I had or still have some enamel pieces, but are integrating some of this hard gemstone alternative to that. And then
I saw, sorry to interrupt, but I saw the same at Roberto Coin. I know what you mean.
yes, I saw that as well. And then also in color, rainbow pieces. I saw so many, and specifically like the gemstone ombre rainbow, which, you know, I saw some ombre last year, but it feels like it's, if you wanted to find your rainbow sapphire tennis bracelet, you could easily get your hands on one of those now.
This
They're
was your year.
it was, they had a year. Lisa Nick has some great pieces like that that I saw. And, you know, not just that, you know, very specific. What comes to mind for me, I think the baguette cut, you know, tennis bracelet style, but Greenwich Street's Pride ring that they have, we just did a story. They're doing a raffle for Pride Month, and they have this ring from their Stardust collection. It's a gold ring. It's a little more organic, but it's got all these rainbow stones in it. So kind of also more organic, as well as like your very put together flush tennis bracelet look. So lots of options there.
Um, Lauren, you also attended the Trends on the Show floor session. Can you talk a little bit about the, we'll call it a 40-year retrospective? That came up at the Trend session. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we had some familiar faces from JCK magazine, I believe, up there talking, and
You can say
they,
their names, it's okay.
well, Melissa and Vicky, I want to say, and I hope that I'm saying them right. But they mentioned a 40-year nostalgia, so that nostalgia tends to look back about 40 years. So you have certain designers that are all hitting the age to where they're 40 years back is either the 80s or the 90s. And perhaps that gives some explanation to some of the, you know, big chunky gold, neon 80s-ish pieces, and then also to some of the Y2K collections that have been pretty popular the last year or two.
Yeah, okay. That's really interesting. And
That makes sense, yeah.
all the big chunky chains are definitely very 80s. I want to talk a little bit about the price of gold and this interest in big chunky gold pieces. Amanda Gizzi, when we did our pre-Vegas webinar, talked a little bit about this, and then I really noticed it at the show. I was thinking about how back in 2008, when the gold price spiked during the economic downturn, and we were in a recession, I will caveat, we were in a recession, but you know, when the gold price spiked, everybody went running to silver. Silver was big and everyone was buying silver jewelry. That's when Pandora really took off in the US market. And I just don't see that happening this time. And again, I understand we're not in a recession, but Amanda made that point at I would thought it was a really good one in a previous webinar. And I noticed when we were in Vegas, people are still buying gold jewelry and they're buying big pieces when you think about the price of gold, because that's what's popular now. You know, we went through that kind of layering, which layering is still popular, but we kind of went through that dainty jewelry phase. And now people are wanting big, like big earrings, big chunky bracelets, big chunky chains. And they're going for it, even though the price of gold was so high, which is so interesting. And I don't also, and you know, retailers write me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't see as much we buy gold as I saw during when the gold price spiked before. Yes, jewelers always buy off the street. It's always part of their business. But I remember that was keeping some jewelers afloat during the recession. And I don't feel like that's being as put forward this time. Like people, I'm sure people are buying gold or you know, swapping their gold to get money and have something new made. But it's not as front and center as it was during the recession. And I thought that was really interesting. It's a really interesting time considering the price of gold for everybody to be in the huge looks. But again, stellar, great bellwether for the industry. That's what they predict is going to be in for the holidays too. And that's what they were showing at their booth, kind of bigger earrings, chunky bracelets, chunky chains. So I think it's really interesting considering how expensive gold is right now. I want to talk a little bit too, we kind of segued into this a bit, but I want to talk a little bit too about everybody's favorite appointments or the best things you saw. Lenore, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, yeah. This is a tough question because I don't like to play favorites, but I do have favorites. I thought my Hearts on Fire appointment was a really fun one. I think their new collection, the bar collection, which comes alongside its recent rebranding, I thought it was so, so good. I've taken appointments with them before, and I usually expect to see this very elegant, essential jewelry, you know, tennis bracelets, stud earrings. And this was just like a next level, like design focused collection. And I was so pleasantly surprised. I thought it was so, so good. Um,
It's interesting for Hearts on Fire, right? Because like they're, it's the world's most perfectly cut diamond. That's their line and everything. And it seems like they're now wanting to be seen more of a jewelry brand and wearing less emphasis on the diamond and being like a diamond brand and more emphasis on the design and being a jewelry brand, which is an interesting pivot for them.
for sure.
But yeah, I agree. I didn't see that collection in person. Lenore, you took that appointment, but Natalie covered for it for the site after the show, and I thought the same thing. I thought that was really outstanding design. It's beautiful.
It was so, so good.
Congratulations to
Never
them.
in
That's a great
person.
collection.
Um, and I will just list two other favorites because I could go on and on. I took so many appointments and I saw so many like incredible things. I always love stopping by to see Lena at Lord Jewelry. They're a father-daughter duo out of LA. And I just think their use of color and enamel is so good, and the pieces are so fun. Speaking of flamingos, they had this really great, like fun inlay flamingo pendant, and then they had a pair of mismatched earrings that were also inlay with like palm tree leaves. They were so, so cool. And then they had this big, big like bird cage ring. And when you move your hand back and forth, the bird inside swings. It was so fun. And then my last one, I will say another favorite for me is always Mikimoto. I'm a huge fan of pearls, and in my opinion, I think they have like the best there is. And the people at Mikimoto, Lauren came with me. The people who showed us around, like they are so knowledgeable and they have such a love for the product that they make you love it too, even if you're not a pearl person. Um, and we got an invite to their showroom in New York. So Lauren and I should definitely take them up on that.
That was a fantastic appointment. And I agree. That was the most like you can tell when the people there are just so passionate about what they do and they love it. Like it was just radiating off of the people that were I almost said booth, but they were in a villa. They had a
They had a
whole
whole villa.
multi-room setup. But that was fantastic appointment. I
Yep,
love them as
super
well.
fun.
Were there snacks? I love when there are snacks.
There were snacks.
We did have
Love
snacks,
a
yeah.
snack.
So yeah, I'll cut it down to three favorites and let someone else go because I'll just keep talking.
No, that's good, Lenore. It's hard. It is hard though. It's hard. You see so much, like not only are you overwhelmed with information, but it's hard to play favorites because you see so much good design.
Yeah.
Oh, Lenore, did you want to mention Marie Lichtenberg?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna cut myself off, but if you're gonna let me keep talking, I'm gonna mention two pieces that I really
Somebody needs to mention Marie Lichtenberg because she's
two
outstanding.
pieces that I just really loved. So she had this like space themed rocket ship and alien like double pendant. So one side, like Lauren had said, has this like rainbow of sapphires underneath like Saturn, and it's got this really cool like galaxy background. And then the other pendant has this really fun like little green alien face. It was so, so good. I have to have it. It's incredible. It's probably one of my favorite things I saw there. And then the second and last piece I will mention is I was at Cicada's booth and they had the oddest little brooch. I think he's fantastic. He's a little organ grinder monkey. So he's in like the little hat and the jacket, like with the shoulder pads. And then his tail is being lifted up by this like giant set of balloons. And they're all like cabochon gems. It was, I don't know who that's for, but the person it's for is going to find it and absolutely fall in love with it.
I don't know how Cicada let the summer of cicadas go by without making a small ode to a cicada. I'm sure somebody has at
There
some
was a
point.
lot going on at their
I've seen
booth.
grasshopper jewelry, so somebody has to have made a cicada at some point.
They also had a flamingo now that I think about it. They had a great flamingo brooch in there.
I love
More than
flamingos.
flamingo, maybe.
What an outstanding bird.
All right, I'm gonna cut
Lauren,
myself off
your
there.
turn to play favorites because I'm still thinking, so I'm gonna throw it over to you.
Well, all of my favorite appointments kind of centered around one theme,
Is
which
it
is
colored gemstones?
in a
Yeah.
way, but it was actually fringe. So one of the
Ooh.
appointments I really enjoyed was a new brand out of Austin, Texas, Jamie Turner. Um, it's these two partners. One of them is a background in CAD, the other one is a collector, and they partnered up and now have this really awesome brand. And this was, I want to say this was their couture debut, if I'm correct. One of the founders is from my hometown, so I have a little bit of a bias there. But they have some awesome, very like Southwest feel jewelry and some, speaking of using colors in different ways, they've got these big bead necklaces. And one of them that I tried on moonstone beaded necklace and a kyanite beaded necklace. Really cool. And I mean big beads, like huge, like marble sized. It was awesome. And then so that Southwest kind of feel,
You love a Southwest feel.
I love a Southwest feel. I love a Western jewelry and I love turquoise. And so I saw a lot of like fringe tassel. I was surprised, and someone else, I think maybe one of the panelists mentioned this too, that in the I, someone's gonna have to help me out of something core, but like the year of Cowboy Carter and all this Western Southwest feel that wasn't as apparent as I kind of thought it might be.
Mm.
Interesting. Do they just call that cowboy core, Western
Maybe
core?
it's
I don't know.
cowboy core. Someone will correct me.
Yeah, yeah, somebody write in, let us know.
But I thought that the range of kind of fringe tassel jewelry was so wide and so creative. I saw Guzima at JCK, their Ukrainian brand, and she has these gold rings with chain fringe on them, and it's long, like takes up the whole finger. It's very cool. It's very fun. I wore it around. I thought it was going to annoy me, and it didn't at all. It was just like silk on my hand. It was awesome. And then everything from that up to like a more elevated piece. Jenna Blake has some diamond fringe, like very, very luxurious. So there's a wide range. And then, I've seen some pieces. I'm drawing a blank on who I saw at the show, so I'm going to talk about something I saw at auction. Hemmerle had a pair of tassel earrings that just went at auction with little bitty tanzanite beads that made the tassels, and I saw a handful of those at the show too. So I'm kind of loving the creativity around tassel and fringe jewelry right now. So those were my favorites.
No, that's really good. I like fringe jewelry too, and I hope the fringe jewelry saw was more attainable than the Hemmerle earrings, which I'm sure sold for a lot. Wouldn't we all like to own a piece of Hemmerle?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to talk about, there's so many things I want to talk about. The first thing I want to shout out is the luminaries. This was 6 designers who were part of the Couture Diversity Action Council. The group started in 2020, and this is the second class of mentees, and 6 out of the 7 of them were exhibiting at Couture. They had their kind of like own little section. Each individual designer, all 6 of them, had a vitrine. And I was probably in there for almost an hour and a half. And Lenore, you mentioned this, or maybe it was Lauren, that each of them was so excited to show their designs. Their designs are all so distinctive. I thought they were all great. They all fill a niche in the market. And they all had like a story and a reason for every single piece. And it was also thoughtful. And I just thought it was wonderful. I love spending time with them. And I think the move to make this industry more diverse has added so much joy and creativity. And I love the luminaries of Couture, and I love the group that was in the Couture show at 2020. I can't think off the top of my head what they were called, but this is some of the most exciting jewelry I've seen in recent years. So I want to talk a little bit about the luminaries. I also loved Lauren Harwell Godfrey, might be one of the best designers working today. Harwell Godfrey is her brand. This was all over Instagram, so I'm not going to talk about it a ton because everybody saw it, but she made a watch that doesn't tell time. It's just a one time on it. And the time she had on it was 11:11. And on the bottom of the band, it said make a wish. And the 11:11 were all like specially cut baguette diamonds. The background was all colored gemstone cut. solid gold band. I'm sure everybody saw this on Instagram. It was incredible. And she just is never like, she's never runs out of ways to be creative and be different. Like she always has something to show you that you know is going to be great. She had the honey bear last year that was carved out of fire
Right.
opal. I'm still not over that. But I thought this watch was incredible. And I mean, not that I'm buying one, unless when someone wants to get me one, but she'll do any time you want. And you could do, the time you were born, the time your kids were born, whatever, and she'll put any kind of message on it that you want. But I thought the 1111 good luck was pretty cool. I also would mention I loved Francesca Villa. Bella Naiman did a story for our City of the Majors this year, and she talked about the lenticular pendants that Francesca Villa does. So the lenticulars were those kind of trading cards from the 70s, 80s. They have kind of like the bumpy surface, and when you turn them, it looks like they move. Like you might have Batman standing in one, and then he's like punching in the next. I think everybody knows what I mean. So she takes these lenticulars and sets them into jewelry. And we had them in the State of the Majors, and they were just so fun to see in person. And we highlighted this as piece of week during in Vegas. She did an evil eye inspired lenticular that looks like kind of an antique evil eye piece of jewelry, but it was a lenticular while the eye was either like opening, closing, or blinking. And that was really fun. And she also did these signet rings, and she had a name for them, I can't recall, but it was one side was a little ancient cameo, and then you popped it out, and the other side was like a radish or a flower. And she called them, she's like, it was like a business pleasure ring. She's like, you put the cameo side up when you're going to work, and you put the radish or flower side up when you're, after work, when you're going out with your friends. And she's so creative, and I think she won Best in Debuting at the Couture Design Awards. Am I correct?
You
Believe
sure
so,
did.
yeah.
And well deserved. Her jewelry's gorgeous. And just like Lauren Harwell Godfrey, it just amazes me how creative people get with jewelry. And I think that's one of the most fun things about Couture and to see in Vegas. It's just the people having fun. We get so marred down in the business side of jewelry. We forget it's supposed to be fun, and it's beautiful, and it's something that people love, and they love to wear it, and they love to remember things. And I think sometimes that gets lost, but I just love it when I see jewelry that puts a smile on my face. And I feel that way every time I see Harwell Godfrey, and I was so happy to meet Francesca Villa and the Luminaries. I thought their jewelry was great. So we want to leave some time for questions, but we do have one last thing to discuss. We want to talk about favorite events or events we wish we attended. So for me, I'm going to go first. I was very sad to miss Marian Faisal's talk at the Natural Diamond Council Lounge. She gave a talk on Friday morning. We had work to do. I couldn't make it. She has an engagement ring book that I believe is coming out at the end of the year. It's about the history of the engagement ring. It's going to be great. I think it's going to be a huge book. And she gave a little presentation about it at the Natural Diamond Council Lounge, which we'll also talk about. And the NDC folks told me that they had like 140 pre-orders already. I can't wait to see Marian's book and read it and interview her about it. That's going to be a big story later this year and into next year. I think a lot of people in the industry will be interested in buying that book. So that was kind of my one thing that I went to the one thing I missed going to that I wish I could have. I'm going to register a small complaint about the Couture opening night party. I waited too long to get candy, and the candy bar was completely decimated at the end of the night. I think I got one lemon head, so that was a problem for me. Future tip, get to the candy bar as soon as you go in. But all kidding aside, the opening night party was nice as well. It was a good time. Lauren, favorite event or thing that you wanted to go to that you didn't make it to?
Um, I really enjoyed the education sessions at JCK this year. I know that, all of the organizers over there do a lot to put those together and make sure that the panels are good. And I went to a handful more than I've gone to in the past, and all of them were extremely informative and wonderful. The colored stone update, I went to a lab grown update, natural diamond update, and all of them were just very, very well done. Great moderators. I feel like I learned a ton, which is great to be able to walk away and say I saw some cool jewelry, but I also learned a lot. So that was nice. And then, I missed a handful of events that went on at the Natural Diamond Council Lounge that I would have loved to attend. There was a Diamonds Provenance talk with some museum curators, Larry West from LJ West Diamonds, and I believe Susan Jacques was on that panel as well. I think Lenore went to that and said it was amazing. I would have loved to sit in on that and hear some more diamond talk, but the lounge was fantastic. So that's really all I can say that I'm sad I missed.
Yeah, the lounge was great, and retailers were raving about it too. They also had like a bourbon tasting diamond trivia night that I couldn't attend that I thought sounded very cool too.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love a trivia night. I was sad to miss that.
Yeah. I would also point, I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump back in because I forgot to mention this. I only got to go in the antique show for about 15 minutes. It was the end of one of the days. I was exhausted, and you really need to go in there full steam in the morning and really be willing to go booth by booth. That's the only way to do it. I only went in there and saw a couple booths, and I was so tired I had to call it. But I'm really sad I did not get antique show time this year. It's tough though. There's a lot to see between Couture and JCK Las Vegas. Like I said, the antique show, you could spend a whole day in there.
Yeah, I agree. That's a regret of mine too. I really only had like a really short chunk of time to go in there and take a quick look around. But you're right. You need to like block out time earlier in your day, earlier in the week before they get rid of all the good stuff, to really walk through there and enjoy it. They had wonderful stuff, but I know that they've told me that like the really like out of this world stuff goes pretty early in the show, which is totally
Yeah.
understandable. You don't want to miss out.
My search
Um,
for the perfect pair of Victorian era wedding cuffs continues.
they're out there for you, Michelle. We will find them. And then I will say, my favorite event, I thought JCK Rocks was so fun this year. Um, Lauren and I went to see Flo Rida, which I thought was a really great way to end the trip. He was a really fun performer. And I also caught $1 million in Flo Rida money. So I just work here for fun now.
What are you going to spend your Flo Rida money on?
I'm probably going to invest half of it and then blow the rest of it at the antique show next year.
Okay, I think that
That's
sounds
what I
like
think
a
I'm gonna do
great
with it.
plan. Before we move on to questions we got a number of questions beforehand that I want to get to. Um, before we move on to questions, should we give a little Las Vegas restaurant review?
I think we should. Yeah, I
We
think
had
we
a
have
team
something
dinner
to
at
add.
the Bedford with his Martha Stewart's restaurant in the Paris. Lauren, you are the biggest Martha Stewart fan on the staff. I'm going to let you start the review.
Well, to be honest, they could have served me water, and I was happy to be in the exact replica of Martha Stewart's living room, which was the restaurant where we were eating. Like it was incredible. The food was amazing. Also, but I love Martha Stewart, so I was just happy to be there.
Lenore, do you want to give a review or do you want me?
Um, what I will say is I thought the experience was fun. I like the concept of like being in Martha Stewart's living room.
Which
Um,
was very nice.
which was nice. It was a beautiful restaurant. I think if I had to give it a number rating, I would put it at like a 6
Out of what, 10?
out of 10.
Okay.
Because I think, I don't know, I mean, you think Martha Stewart, you just have really high hopes for it. And
Yeah.
I thought it was all right. How do you feel about it, Michelle?
So I'll give a more detailed review. I thought it was really, really expensive, but I understand eating out everywhere is expensive now, but I think 70 some dollar pork chop seems excessive. I also don't like pork chops. I had a $35 plate of pierogies, and I've had better pierogies at a church in Pittsburgh that were $7 a plate or $5 a plate, to be frank. The mac and cheese needed seasoning. It was very bland. And I felt like the best thing about the meal was the bread basket, which was $25, but it was totally worth it.
Which is outrageous, but I will say
It's
it's the best
outrageous.
thing I had there.
Yeah, that's my review. Lauren, I'm sorry. I know you really like Martha Stewart, but I think I also had really high hopes for her restaurant and I wasn't. Maybe it was just an off night for mac and cheese. I don't know, but I wasn't blown away by the experience. And also I think when you pay that much for something, which is fine, like I get it. It's all my money anyway, but when you pay that much for something, you really expect a lot. And I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, so the team is taking Las Vegas restaurant recommendations for next year.
Yeah, please, if anybody has any. So please send them to us. Well, Lauren and Lenore, thank you for that discussion. And I want to thank again our sponsor, the Gemological Institute of America. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We had quite a few come in beforehand, but we're going to try to get to as many as possible. While we give you guys a minute to ask questions, I just want to say a quick word about our sponsor. This webinar is brought to you by GIA, the Gemological Institute of America, protecting consumers and supporting the global gem and jewelry trade since 1931 through research, education, and laboratory services. So again, thank you to GIA. Now I want to get started with some listener questions. So the first question we had come in beforehand, and we're just going to get this out of the way because we're just going to answer this question until at the end of time, I guess. The state of lab grown. I'll start. So there's lab grown diamonds people, they're still here. They had them at Stellar booth, and what this Stellar team told me, they're still selling them obviously, so people are still buying them, is that consumers are picking lab grown diamonds for bigger diamonds. They want bigger stud earrings, they want a bigger engagement ring than they can afford in natural, and or they want something like a tennis bracelet because it's a look, it's on trend right now, and they can't afford that many carats in diamonds. They want a big tennis bracelet, and they're going with lab grown for that. So that, and Lenore, you made this observation, we can talk a little bit about it. Overall though, I did feel like there were fewer lab grown diamond companies at JCK Las Vegas. They're not so much a thing at Couture, but I felt at JCK Las Vegas, there were fewer lab grown diamond companies. And in fact, I actually don't think I had any appointments with any lab grown diamond companies this time, but Lenore, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I'm not sure that I've ever seen lab grown at Couture. But as far as JCK, now I was not visiting with any brands that are specifically lab grown, but of the brands that I did meet with, I would say maybe a handful of times, 2 or 3, did I see lab grown, one being at the Stuller booth.
Which again, they're huge suppliers, so they have customers all over the country with then they have all different kind of customers, so.
Right. And the only other 2 companies, one at Couture actually, and then one at JCK that I saw had lab grown are companies that focus on bridal. So it's still an option there. But as far as like fashion jewelry or anything like that, I did not see any lab grown.
Okay. Which doesn't mean it's not out there. There was just less.
Doesn't mean it's not out there. It could just be my selection of appointments didn't include that, but I think I saw less of it this year for sure.
Okay. Lauren, do you want to give a little update from the lab grown panel you attended? Because someone else asked, what were your thoughts on the lab grown diamond market seminars? But I'm not sure how many there were, but you went to one.
I went to one, and what I'll say is I didn't hear a whole lot that hasn't already been part of the conversation, which is some retailers enjoy having the diverse option to offer lab grown diamonds. Others that are choosing to not offer lab grown diamonds are doing it from a branding or a reputation perspective. And then, we got to hear one of the panels included someone who, an executive involved in a growing facility. So that was a perspective I don't feel like we get a whole lot of. And, there was very obviously is that's their product. And so, they're really pushing the benefits of it. Again, nothing that we haven't heard, which is it's affordable, it's giving another option. But I'll just say that there's was nothing specifically mentioned that is really groundbreaking in terms of lab grown that's not already part of the discussion. I mean, the prices are going down, will probably continue to go down. And at the end of the day, it's a retailer's decision. They know their customer base, they know their client base, and they know what's worked in the past. So, I mean, that was really the baseline.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. This doesn't have anything to do with the Las Vegas shows. Oh, before we go on, I wanted to mention on the exhibitor's note, we obviously know why now, but it was interesting to note that Lightbox did not have a presence at JCK Las Vegas this year, and they had a fairly large booth last year. And they had that whole, I don't remember if you remember this, but last year Lightbox was the company that had that whole slot machine motif at their booth. I don't know if either you went in, but anyway, it was a pretty elaborate presence for Lightbox this year, and then they just weren't there at all. Excuse me, it was a pretty elaborate presence for Lightbox last year, and then they just weren't there at all this year. One thing that came up, this again is not Vegas related, but one thing that came up in Conclave in Austin, Texas, AGS Conclave back in April was I talked to a couple retailers who I thought were doing something interesting where they are offering natural diamonds in their store and lab grown diamonds separately. And I talked to one retailer who was giving me this really interesting perspective that some people do want the bigger and they go lab grown, but some people now see having a smaller diamond as a signal that your diamond is natural and thereby more valuable, and they pick that. And she said for her, now customers know when they see someone that's bought a diamond and it comes in a box from her jewelry store, that's a natural diamond. And she has a slightly different name for her lab grown diamond line, which she sells online. And then she said, when people see that branding in that box, they know that's a lab grown diamond. So I thought that was like an interesting approach that she's going to offer both, but kind of offer lab grown as a separate offering.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's the state of lab grown. I hope whoever asked those questions, I hope that was helpful. I think Lauren made a good point. I think most of the discussions about lab grown, I mean, it's just on and on all the time. And it's just rehashing the same things that are always said. And at the end of the day, the consumer is the one who ultimately decides what they want. So I don't know why we keep hashing this over and over and over again, but people seem to love to talk about it, so we need to address it. Somebody else asked, and Lauren and Lenora, I know you had an appointment with Mikimoto. I think you can answer this question. Did anyone else hear about pearls being made with synthetic nacre? That's how you say it, correct?
That sounds right.
Is there a way to detect them? And I know that this came up at the Mikimoto appointment.
So at our appointment, we didn't ask. It was just the person who was showing us around brought it up, that they test all of their pearls. And of course, that was curious for us. So we asked what exactly they were looking for when they were testing. And I hope that this is actually an answer to the question, but I think maybe in terms of, is there a way to test it? It seems to us like there is. Mikimoto obviously has that kind of technology to be able to do that. Is there synthetic nacre? I don't know if we can answer that. That wasn't like obvious to us in what he was telling us. He more seemed like he was saying, when pearls are created naturally, then they are created around whatever, in the shape of whatever has stirred up the grain of sand or whatever, which is why you don't get perfectly round pearls versus, cultured pearl. If you put something in it that is perfectly round, then it's more likely to form in that shape. And sometimes they can put something perfectly round in it, but it will form organically, which isn't a perfect indicator of if it is cultured or natural. And I hope that this is making sense. Lenore, does this sound on track to what he was telling us?
It does. I mean, this is not my area of expertise in particular, but what you're saying rings a bell for me.
It's not so much mine either, but to answer the question, I can't say based on what the representative at Mikimoto's told us if there's this if they're speaking about synthetic nacre, but it does sound like there's a way to test the nucleus of a pearl, and the inception of it is how it made sense to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that sounds right. I would also note one other thing of interest we saw at our Mikimoto appointment that we didn't bring up. He was talking about the price of pearls and the availability. And Mikimoto had some non-pearl jewelry in there. So jewelry that I think was just different shades of sapphire.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very beautiful, but it was interesting to us to think of a piece of Mikimoto jewelry not having pearls.
Interesting, yeah. You wrote about the price of pearls, Lauren, in your story for the State of the Majors.
Yeah, still expensive. Everyone that I talked to at JCK made the point that they were expensive, and I didn't see a ton of pearl pieces at Couture. Here and there were a few, but it wasn't overly, obvious.
Now that you say that, you're right. I don't think I saw that many either.
Yeah, I mean, outside of like SAL or somebody who specializes in pearls, I think that's a good point. I didn't see a ton of pearl jewelry either. And I would say I was sitting next to a colleague at the Couture Design Awards, and we were kind of commenting that we felt like even on the pieces in the even the pieces in the Couture Design Awards in the pearl category, my colleague was kind of observing, she's like, well, those are not very pearl heavy pieces for the pearl category. And I thought that was just like a little observation she made, but kind of fits what you were saying about not seeing that many pearl pieces.
And
Go
I
ahead.
have one thing to add in pearls, and I didn't have as many conversations about pearls as I had about other types of gemstones. But I will say I was at the ASBA booth, and I think that they're at AGTA Gem Fair. If not, they're in the loose gem section at JCK, and they were saying that one of their best sellers is a yellow pearls and also like a grayish pearl. So not like your white classic look, but something a little more, I guess, just like unique, individual. But he also made a point to tell me that in the amount of time that they'd been speaking to the other pearl vendors around them, that was totally different than the requests that they were getting. So there didn't really seem to be a streamline of what kinds of pearls people were asking for or wanting. But it's worth mentioning that the price of pearls is up across almost every category.
Interesting. Thank you. So we have time for one more question. Somebody wanted to know, should we consider colored stone engagement rings as important as diamond? So this is an interesting question. I think every year when you kind of look at the knot, whether it's the wedding report, they do these different trend reports about engagement rings. The round brilliant has the biggest percentage of the market share. This is US market for engagement rings. And I think, most engagement rings are still diamonds, but I would say, I feel like every year there's a little creep of both fancy shaped diamonds and of color into bridal. Is it as important as diamond? I don't think so. But I do think it's an option, and it's something that people are embracing more. And I think, with every passing year, every generation, people are a little bit more willing to like let go of tradition a little bit. And we see this across the board with, the way people approach relationships and traditions at weddings and everything kind of around that. But I think for me, each and every year, there's a little like people are experimenting a little more with fancy shapes and a little more with colors. So I don't know if either you have a perspective on that. I didn't see a mind-blowing amount of colored stone engagement rings built as options at either show. But I do think that something like that gains a little traction every year. I don't think it's dethroned diamond as the stone of choice for engagement rings, but
No, I wouldn't say that. But I do think in the past couple of years, obviously, there's been a rise in alternative engagement rings, but I don't think colored gemstone engagement rings are close to the preference that natural diamonds or lab-grown diamonds have.
Lauren, any thoughts from the color camp?
I think
well, let me ask you this. Would you have chosen a colored gemstone engagement ring? Is that something you entertained?
Yeah, it was something that I entertained. I ended up going with a lab grown diamond for my engagement ring because I wanted something a little bit bigger. So there you go.
Uh-oh, you've outed yourself
Oh,
now.
no. I
That's
think it's a
okay.
beautiful ring, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm not ashamed of it.
You shouldn't be. It's
Wait,
beautiful.
can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because this comes up all the time and it's come up in the chat today.
Yeah.
When you were doing that, I mean, being in the jewelry industry, obviously you understood the whole spectrum of the value and the falling value. Do you look at it and worry about like, oh, this isn't going to be worth anything in 20 years if I want to upgrade for my 20-year anniversary? Like, how did you kind of walk through that process? Because this just came up in the chat and this comes up all the time. And I have a lot of thoughts about like this whole discussion around future value. And I get both sides. I'm not saying one thing or the other, but as a young consumer that made that choice, do you mind walking us through your thought process?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I will say, like, I considered a natural diamond. I considered a natural colored gemstone. It was a thoughtful choice for me. So it wasn't just like, oh, I want like, I put thought and time and energy into deciding what I wanted. And ultimately, part of the reason why I went lab grown is because I'm someone whose tastes change often. And I know that while I'm always going to love my original engagement ring, right?
Be
And
careful.
I'm being very careful with my words here. While I'm always gonna love my original engagement ring, and it has value to me from an emotional and sentimental standpoint, that I like to change up my look, and I can definitely see myself wanting a different style to wear on my ring finger, and that being more feasible for me to upgrade and change and do something different a few years in the future. And in talks about it with my particular partner for an anniversary or a yearly gift, natural means more to us from an investment standpoint, right? But like my engagement ring, like my wedding band is real natural stones. And anniversary bands, anniversary rings are real natural stones. But for my engagement ring, I wanted something big, I wanted something fashionable, and
But you wear it every day. It's part of your look.
yeah, it's as much of my style as it is a signifier of the fact that I'm in a relationship. So I wanted it to be something that reflected my style, and I wanted a bigger stone, and that was what was available to me and my partner. So that's why I chose what I chose.
Well,
And
thank
I'm
you for
happy with it.
sharing. I appreciate that because I think it's interesting to hear from, sorry to put you on the spot, but I think it's interesting to hear from like a consumer perspective why people make the choices they make.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
I
good
mean,
point.
based on the stone that I have, right? Like if that stone was available to me,
If the
you
size
know,
of stone was available to you, but
the size, the cut, the clarity, if all of that was available to me from a financial standpoint, well, I would have done it, but it's not even close, right? Like I have like a 2.5 carat engagement ring, and I'm pretty young, and so is my partner. So it's just what was available to us, and I'm happy with it. So
okay. Well, thank
Well,
you.
that's what matters.
Yeah, that is what matters at the end. So thanks again to our sponsor, GIA, and everyone who joined us today, our audience. Thank you again for joining us. Lauren and Lenore, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you and all your hard work in Vegas on a day-to-day basis. So my next question is going to take a little break for the summer. National Jeweler's still going on, don't worry, but my next question is going to take a little break. And we're going to return after our summer recess on September 24th. I know that sounds so far away, but Amanda Gizzi, she's director of PR and events here at Jewelers of America. She's going to have a holiday prep webinar. Mark your calendars, Tuesday, September 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern. The details are right there. Thanks again for joining us today. Everyone, please take care.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.